I'm James from Bike Lock Wiki, and in this video we're comparing the Via Velo Mini to the ABUS Granit Plus 640. First, before we get into attacks using tools, we'll drop each lock 5 times from shoulder height, roughly 1.6 meters, to simulate the knocks and drops a lock receives during its life. Here we're looking for any damage, including parts breaking off or any considerable damage to the exterior of either lock. Both locks survived this test and showed light scratching to their outer housing and operated as if new. The Bolster Chisel test is performed to test the strength of either lock's dead bolts. Weak locking mechanisms can shear and break due to the force exerted on one side of the shackle. Hitting each lock 10 times in the same place inflicted minor external damage to either lock, and both locking mechanisms held strong and thwarted the attack here. At this point, both locks are still working fine. Hammer testing next to simulate heavy impact attacks and to test the durability and strength of either lock's protective mechanism housing. The Via Velo Mini's external plastic housing is quite brittle and shattered fairly easily when struck, but the internal mechanism armouring resisted any significant damage and the locking mechanism continued to work afterwards. The ABUS Granit Plus 640's plastic is considerably more durable and put up an impressive display. The hammer attack caused one end of the plastic housing to split open, but it stayed intact and the lock still worked smoothly upon completion. Despite using a brand new HSS or high-speed steel hacksaw blade, both locks resisted this test with ease. The hacksaw couldn't make a dent in either lock's hardened steel shackle, and I gave up after the saw blade began to blunt. I'm going to invest in a better quality hacksaw for my next review to see if this makes a difference. Because the ABUS Granit Plus 640 shackle diameter is nearly 2 mm less than the Via Velo Minis, I wasn't sure how it would stand up to the 24-inch bolt cutters, which are small enough to be concealed for use on the street and therefore a popular weapon of choice for thieves. However, as soon as I got underway with the 24-inch bolt cutters here, I quickly realised they weren't going to make the cut, if you pardon the pun. Switching to the Via Velo Mini, I had very little confidence I'd be able to crop its 14mm shackle, and after a hopeless 2-minute struggle, I gave up again, unable to make a mark, despite using my full body weight, roughly 90 kilos, as leverage on both attempts. Time to up the ante and introduce more serious tooling. Before we begin using the 42-inch bolt cutters, I do need to note that these cutters are so cumbersome that they'd be impossible to conceal and use without drawing attention to oneself. Therefore, it's unlikely a thief will use a pair of cutters this large on the street. Via Velo Mini up first this time, which put up a very impressive fight. As you can see, I was using my full body weight to attempt to cut the 14mm shackle, but it simply wasn't happening, and with tired arms I gave up after just over a minute. With the results gathered from testing the ABUS 640, it is important to remember that this lock is 2mm thinner than the Via Velo Mini. However, 5 seconds after inserting the lock into the jaws of the 42-inch cutters, the shackle gave way, which is surprisingly quick. But don't forget, the 640 is significantly lighter than the Mini and has been designed with more emphasis on its portability. I attempted a second cut to ensure the first wasn't a fluke, and again, the shackle struggled to resist these chunky 42-inch cutters. Upon inspection, I did notice that when cut, the ABUS Granit 640 lacks proper anti-rotation features, meaning that when one cut has been made through the shackle, it's game over for your bike, as the shackle can simply be twisted open. Now, the ABUS 640 doesn't claim to be suitable for use with e-bikes, but the Via Velo does, so naturally, as e-bikes are commonly targeted by angle grinder wielding thieves, I wanted to see how these locks compare in terms of cutting times. To provide prior context to the results we obtain here, I cut the Kryptonite New York Standard, which is a 14mm pedal cycle gold rated D-lock, and averaged a cutting time over 5 cuts of 15.7 seconds. Over its 5 cuts, the ABUS Granit Plus 640 cut in an average time of 5.83 seconds, which is surprisingly quick, but it does have a relatively thin 12mm shackle. On the other hand, the Via Velo Mini averaged 9.51 seconds over 5 cuts, On one of the cuts I made, the grinder jumped out of the groove I was cutting, and this attempt took 17.08 seconds. So I removed it from the average results, as it's an obvious outlier that would skew the data gathered. Overall, these results suggest that the Via Velo provides almost 40% more resistance to grinder attacks, despite only having a 14% thicker shackle, which could also suggest that the metal used by the Via Velo Mini shackle is harder to cut with angle grinders. With destruction testing out of the way, we'll now take a look at the features and characteristics of both of these locks. I do recommend watching this section, as it will help you understand if either of them are suitable for you and your bike, and as always, I'll also throw in several security tips that you should be using to increase the security of your bike when locking up. Cyclists who enjoy a lightweight bike lock will be pleased to hear that both of these lock models are relatively lightweight. The Via Velo Mini short version weighs just under a kilo at 980 grams or 2.15 pounds, which is fairly lightweight for a sold secure pedal cycle gold rated bike lock. The ABUS Granit Plus 640 short version comes in significantly lighter, weighing just 800 grams or 1.76 pounds, thanks to its thinner shackle and compact mechanism housing. So if minimal weight is your priority, then the 640 would be a great choice, but do understand that it offers reduced security compared to the Via Velo Mini, and its Sold Secure Pedal Cycle Silver rating only makes it suitable for securing low value bikes in medium risk areas. Whereas the Via Velo Mini's gold rating means it's suitable for locking high value bikes in high risk areas. If you're interested in the weights and dimensions of the longer lock models of either of these locks, you'll find all of the key details in the description below. The internal locking area of the lock shackle is an important characteristic that you'll want to pay attention to. Whilst the two smaller models are highly portable, their limited internal shackle space means you'll be left with a reduced number of locking options when securing your bike. The Via Velo Mini short version provides slightly more width than the ABUS 640, measuring 89mm wide by 145mm long, whereas the ABUS Granit Plus 640 provides more internal length, measuring 83.4mm wide and 151.7mm long. With both the short and long versions of both of these locks, I was easily able to secure my bike to a standard Sheffield bike rack. A nice security tip for you is to make sure that when you're locking your bike up with any lock, you utilize as much of its internal shackle space as possible. Locking like this makes it considerably harder for thieves to utilize twist or hydraulic attacks to defeat your locks. Bear in mind that none of the locks featured in this video are designed to secure your bike to chunkier immovable objects. In the UK, the bases of street lights are quite thick and chunky, and when I tested, neither lock would secure to these. Instead, you'll need to lock to a standard bike rack or a thinner post. There's a strong correlation between the diameter or width of a lock's shackle, links, or plates and the security that it offers. In general, the thicker the shackle, the more secure the lock. Bear in mind though that this isn't always the case, as some locks are deceptively chunky but offer minimal protection. The Via Velo Mini uses a 13.9mm hardened steel shackle, which isn't quite thick enough to be considered bolt cutter proof, but as we saw in testing, it easily resisted the 24-inch bolt cutters, and I struggled to cause any significant damage with my 42-inch bolt cutters, which are too large for thieves to conceal for use on the street. The ABUS 640 uses a thinner 12mm hardened steel shackle, which also resisted the 24-inch bolt cutters but was easily cropped by our 42-inch pair. To provide context so that the following section isn't misunderstood, the ABUS 640 is produced in ABUS's flagship workshop in Germany. Typically, ABUS's German-made locks are of higher quality than those they manufacture in the Far East. As you'll understand, manufacturing in Germany is more expensive than the Far East, hence the difference in price between these products. I have also observed some differences in component quality, which I touch on towards the end of the review. Comparing the retail prices of these locks, you can almost buy two Via Velo Minis for the same price as one ABUS 640, which does seem wild when you consider the reduced levels of security that the 640 offers. But looking closely in some areas, it does offer several small improvements to the Via Velo Mini. The locking mechanism is one place where the ABUS Granit Plus 640 betters the Via Velo Mini. As the name states, it uses ABUS's Plus disc detainer cylinder, which is super smooth to operate, whereas the Via Velo uses a slider cylinder, which is a little less fluid to operate, but still works well for a lock so affordable. I'll make it very clear that neither of these locks are likely to be picked open on the street. You may have seen popular lock sport videos online, but don't be fooled by how easily the professionals, such as the lock-picking lawyer, make it look. Picking locks requires a lot more practice than you'd think, so thieves are much more likely to use brute force attacks or power tools that require almost zero technical nous to operate. Both locks use automatic keyhole covers to prevent dirt and debris from entering the locking cylinder. This feature is standard on most bike locks these days, but it is helpful because you won't need to remember to close the cover after locking your bike up. The ABUS 640 is supplied with 2 keys, and the long version includes an LED key fob, which can be handy when locking your bike up at night. The Via Velo Mini, on the other hand, is supplied with 4 keys, but doesn't have an LED key fob with either version. If you manage to lose any of your keys, you'll be pleased to hear that both brands offer a key replacement service, allowing you to easily order replacement keys if required. Both of these locks use a double bolted shackle, which makes them much more resistant to twist and hydraulic attacks, a popular attack method used by thieves to pry a lock open. One nice feature about the ABUS 640 is that its shackle release is spring-loaded, meaning it requires a gentle pull to release the shackle from the mechanism, whereas the Via Velo Mini shackle is released when unlocked. Whilst this is a nice addition, it is a luxury feature that doesn't add to the overall security of the lock and does help to explain why the 640 is considerably more expensive. Overall, both of these locks have good designs. The ABUS Granit Plus 640 has a rectangular locking mechanism which makes it slightly slimmer than the Via Velo Mini, but as we've already established, both locks are easily carried in a backpack, your pocket, or with a mounting system. The longer version of either of these locks are supplied with a mount. The common trend I've observed after being submerged within the wonderful world of bike security for the last 6 years is that when you buy a cheaper lock, any accompanying parts such as mounts will typically be lower quality. However, the mounting system supplied with the Via Velo Mini really isn't that bad. It's not quite as good as ABUS's Click Fix mount, but it does the job. The Via Velo mount doesn't tighten down as much as the ABUS Click Fix and is more suited for use on the underside of your bike's top tube if it has one, whereas the Click Fix mounting system tightens down as much as you need and provides a firm hold wherever you mount it on your frame. Both mounts take a few minutes and minimal fiddling to fix in place, so no real complaints here, but it is nice to see a unique mounting system from ABUS. Both of these locks are sold with easily recycled cardboard packaging, which is slowly but surely becoming the standard for most brands, with a few still lagging behind. However, while ABUS own their manufacturing plants and are ultimately a much bigger company than Via Velo, they are doing more to reduce the environmental impact of their manufacturing than Via Velo. ABUS have an impressive waste capture system that takes up to 99% of waste materials from production and recycles them back into the system. There are a bunch of other sustainability projects that ABUS are working on, and you can find out more on their website. Via Velo have reduced their use of single plastics, which is fantastic, but there's room for more to be done by them to reduce their environmental impact. And whilst they're doing some good work to improve upon this, the same goes for ABUS. More can be done here. The best way to lock your bike with either of these locks is to position your lock so that it encompasses your rear wheel and a frame tube at the same time, not forgetting to secure it to an immovable object. If you don't use security bolts on your wheels, you might want to lock your front wheel as well, which can be achieved with a cable extension, or if using quick release axles, you may even remove your front wheel completely and secure it with the lock. And for the penultimate question, which of these locks is best? Well, ultimately, best is a subjective term, and every cyclist has slightly different requirements regarding the security of their bike. However, if I had to choose between these two locks, I'd opt for the Via Velo Mini, as it's more secure, and despite riding a relatively low-value bike, living in London, I frequently lock my bike in high-risk areas, so it's simply not worth the risk for me. On top of this, the considerably cheaper price of the Via Velo Mini makes it the obvious choice for me. If you do want to find out any more about either of these locks, you'll find links down in the description below. These are affiliate links, so I may earn a small kickback if you make a purchase, but you won't pay any more than you would normally. Thanks very much for watching.